which is the capital of Assyria was Ashur. It also incorporated Nineveh and Babylon. That was Assyria. And then from there it spanned out and started conquering. Then you had Babylonia. Damascus was part of Babylon, and you also had the capital of Babylon being Babylonia. And then you went to Media, being the Medes and the Persia. Golly. And I'm showing this because this is where Daniel was dwelling, as well as Esther. Esther was here as well. Esther was in the captivity of the Persians with Xerxes, whose name is also Ahasuerus. That was where Esther and Mordecai were brought into the picture. But it went from Assyria to Babylon, and then Daniel came in, and Daniel was dwelling in the capital. And then you went to the Medes and the Persians, and the capital was Ecbatana. And you had Darius. You had Darius there, and then eventually,
you gain thousands of classes available 24/7.
Eventually, this is during Artaxerxes. Shalakia. So then you had Ecbatana, and then you had Susa or Shushana, which was part of the Persian Empire, and I think that it was the capital. And that was when Daniel, Nehemiah, and Esther were mentioned as far as being right there next to the king. Those are the cities that they were dwelling in. And during that whole time period, you had Israelites in Jerusalem that were rebuilding the temple. And you also had Daniel and Nehemiah travel and come back to Jerusalem during certain time periods. And that's where you had Esther crying out. Shalakia. Over here is where you had Esther crying out because what was his name? His name starts with the H, but he was trying to kill Esther's family, being the Jews. But simply a quick point on the map. Here it has Susa or Shushana as the capital of Persia. But it could have been that other city that was mentioned. And here you have the Tigris and the Euphrates, which is where Nehemiah had to cross over in order to get to Jerusalem. So he was right here in was it Ecbatana? Yeah, I think it was Ecbatana. I don't know. Yeah, I think it was, Ecbatana. So make sure it's still recording. Yeah. So I'll go through. I'll clear that up on another lesson, just so there's no confusion. Hopefully, I said it clear enough so that people were able to jot down notes. I kind of get mixed up myself, and I got to go back and double check. But I didn't plan on getting that in this lesson, but it fit in as far as the subject goes. So Artaxerxes was the king of the Medes and the Persians, and he was dwelling I'll give more information on that. I'm not going to give an answer and have it be incorrect. But we know that Nehemiah had to cross over the river Tigris and Euphrates in order to get to Jerusalem. So that could have been Ecbatana, which is right there in between Iraq and Iran. Sushana which was the capital of the Persian Empire, is south of that. Let me continue on. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he must give me timber. So Nehemiah asked for 2 letters. Furthermore, I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given to me for the governors of the region beyond the river, that they must permit me to pass through all till I come to Jerusalem, to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he must give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, which pertains to the temple, for the city walls, for the house that I will occupy, and for the house that I will occupy. And the king granted them to me according to the good hand of Yahweh upon me, my power. So you see how when you make prayers to the Lord will work it out for you. You don't gotta fold to these. You don't gotta fold to people trying to pressure you. You don't gotta fold to these people out here. We got a power in heaven that's ready to pour out His mercy upon us. So all you have to do is keep good behavior, follow the laws, statutes, and commandments. All you have to do is keep good behavior, follow the law, statutes, and commandments, and constantly pray. Never stop praying. Constantly pray on a daily basis, whether it be 2 times a day, 3 times a day. You know, when you find yourself doing things and you want to ask the Lord for forgiveness or whatever it may be, never cease to pray. But always meditate on what you want to pray for before you do it, because you don't want to be seeking the Lord out of preeminence or be seeking the Lord out of making vain repetition. So you don't want to be constantly praying for the same things or constantly praying for things of vanity. Like, ain't nobody praying for hey, brothers may pray for things in order for them to be more edifying and more helpful to the church. But ain't nobody praying for no gold necklace. Ain't nobody praying for no diamond ring. We could care less about it. You know, we're praying for the Lord to be able to use us as righteous vessels. You know, we're praying for the Lord to forgive us for our sins and for the sins of our past. So never cease to pray. You showing that you pray, or Shalaki, you praying on a constant basis shows your faith. And you following the law, statutes, and commandments to the best of your ability shows that you love the Lord. That shows your obedience. Nehemiah chapter 2 and verse 9. Then I went to the governors in the region beyond the river and gave them the king's letters. Now the king had sent captains of the army of the horsemen with me. I'm going to repeat that. Then I went to the governors in the region beyond the river and gave them the king's letters. Now the king had sent captains of the army and horsemen with me. Okay? So the king Artaxerxes sent servants with Nehemiah in order to patrol him. When Sanballat, the Horonite, and Tobiah, the Ammonite official, heard of it, they were deeply disturbed that a man had come to seek the well-being of the children of Israel. So these are the same men that had been harassing the Israelites in their building. In the book of Ezra, chapter 4, and verse Ezra chapter 4 and verse 3. And it also has It also has in the subscripture Nehemiah chapter 2 and verse 20. So it's going to drop down to the account of when those men started to be enraged about them building. So Ezra chapter 4 and verse 3 matches up with Nehemiah chapter 2 and verse 9 and 10 all the way down to 20. And those were those men that were harassing them. Now in the back, in the last book of Nehemiah, there's also going to be a point where one of these men pop up again. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard of it, they were deeply disturbed that a man had come to seek the well-being of the children of Israel. So then Nehemiah gets to Jerusalem. Nehemiah views the wall of Jerusalem. So I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Then I arose in the night, and a few men in the night, I and a few men with me, I told no one what my power, Yahweh, had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem, nor was there any animal with me except the one which I rode. And I went out by night through the valley gate of the serpent wall and the refuge wall to view the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and its gates, which were burned with fire. So remember, this is during Artaxerxes. So this is before the temple was fully built. The temple was fully built in 417 BC. This is around four after 465 BC. So around 445 BC. It said 20 years into in the 20th year of Artaxerxes. And you can correlate these two books as far as the timeline goes to get a good time span of when certain things are happening. Yeah, so this is around 465 and later on after that. So there was two occasions where men were harassing and trying to stop the Israelites from building. The second one is in Ezra chapter 4 and verse 23. Until the king. Yeah, so there was two occasions where they tried to stop the Israelites from building. Or two different groups of people. There was Rahum the commander and Shimshai the scribe. And I read this in the last history lesson that I did. But not to get that confused with the occasion that I'm speaking of now. Okay. Yeah, I got it confused with one of their names. So there was two different occasions. I may do some clearing up on that in a later lesson. But back to Nehemiah chapter 2 and verse 14. Then I went to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, and there was no room for the animal under me to pass. So I went up in the night by the valley and viewed the wall. Then I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I had done. I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or the others who did the work. Then I said to them, you see the distress that we are in. So he spoke to the servants that came with him. How Jerusalem lies waste, and its gates are burned with fire. Come and let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer be a reproach. And I told them of the hand of Yahweh, my power, which had been good upon me, and also the king's words that he had spoken to me. So they said, let us rise up and build. Then they set their hands to do this work. But then Sanballat, the Horonite, Tobiah, the Ammonite official, and Geshem, the Arab, heard of it, and they laughed at us and despised us and said, what is this thing you are doing? Will you rebel against the king? So I answered them and said to them, the power of heaven himself will prosper us. Therefore, we his servants will arise and build, but you have no heritage or right or a memorial in Jerusalem. So they tried to discourage him. They tried to discourage him from building. And then chapter 3 goes into them building the wall. It goes into them building a wall, giving a depiction of that. And I'm going to jump to chapter 4. Nehemiah chapter 4 and verse 1. The wall defended against enemies. But it so happened when Sanballat heard that they were rebuilding the wall, that he was furious and very indignant and mocked the Jews. So this relates with Ezra chapter 4 and verse 8. When there were scoffers and mockers trying to stop them from building. And Ezra chapter 5 also gives an account in verse 5. Verse 3, how men were trying to stop them from building as well. I'm going to do some more research on that to find out more information about Ezra chapter 4 and verse 3 about the names of those men. I may have written them down, but I want to make it clear. Yeah, I want to find out who those men were. But here in the book of Nehemiah, it gives an account of the names of who those men that were harassing were. Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabs. So continuing on. Verse 2. Nehemiah chapter 4 and verse 2. And he spoke before his brethren and the army of Samaria and said, what are these feeble Jews doing? Will they fortify themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they complete it in a day? Will they revive the stones from the heaps of rubbish, stones that are burned? Now Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and said, whatever they build, if even a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall. Hear, O our power, for we are despised. Turn their reproach on their own head and give them as plunder to a land of captivity. Do not cover their iniquity, and do not let their sin be blotted out from before you, for they have provoked you to anger before the builders. So that was a prayer that David put up against those who harassed him and exalted themselves against the Lord. He prayed that this is Psalms chapter 109, and Psalms chapter 109 goes into it, but I'll start at verse 6. Set a wicked man over him, and let an accuser stand at his right hand. When he is judged, let him be found guilty, and let his prayer become sin. Let his days be few, and let another take his office. Let his children be fatherless, and his wife a widow. Let his children continually be vagabonds and beg. Let them seek their bread also from their desolate places. Let the creditor seize all that he has, and let strangers plunder his labor. Now this is a prayer that David made to Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai because of his enemies, those who had been accusing him and persecuting him, all the evildoers. Let there be none to extend mercy to him, nor let there be any to favor his fatherless children. Let his posterity be cut off, and the generations following, let their name be blotted out. Let the iniquity of his fathers be remembered before Yahweh, and let not the sin of his mother be blotted out. Let them be continually before Yahweh, that he may cut off the memory of them from the earth. And this shows how Israelites were in tune with the scripture and with one another, with our ancient artifacts and the oracles and the scriptures that we had pertaining to the men before us. So we built the wall, and the entire wall was joined together up to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. Now it happened when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites heard that the wall of Jerusalem were being restored, and the gaps were being closed were beginning to be closed, that they became very angry. And that also shows how there was more Ammonites, there was more Arabs, and more Ashdodites. So there was more men that came with Sanballat and Tobiah. And all of them conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and create confusion. Nevertheless, we made our prayer to Yahweh our power, and because of them, we set a watch against them day and night. Then Judah said, the strength of the laborers is failing, and there is so much rubbish that we are not able to build the wall. And our adversaries said, they will neither know nor see anything till we come into their midst and kill them and cause the work to cease. So it was when the Jews who dwelt near them came that they told us 10 times, for whatever place you turn, they will be upon us. Therefore I positioned men behind the tower, Shalakia, behind the lower parts of the wall, at the opening, and set the people according to their families, with their swords and their spears, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles of the leaders and the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, great and awesome, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. And it happened when our enemies heard that it was known to us that Yahweh had brought their plot to nothing, that all of us returned to the wall, everyone to his work. So their bluff was found out, and the Israelites continued to build. So it was for So it was from that time on that half of my servants worked at construction, while the other half held the spears, the shields, the bows, and wore armor, and the leaders were behind all the house of Judah. So they started building, making that structure as far as the different shifts of those who would build and those who would stand post. Those who built on the wall and those who carried burdens loaded themselves so that with one hand they worked at construction and with the other held a weapon. Every one of the builders had his sword girded on his side, and he built. And the one who surrounded the and the one who sounded the trumpet was besides me. So Nehemiah was the governor. He was governing all of this. Then I said to the nobles and the rulers and the rest of the people, the work is great and extensive, and we are separated far from one another on the wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. So Yahweh will fight for us. So they recognize, hey, we're kind of spread apart. Whenever y'all hear the trumpet, y'all come back over here and the Lord's going to fight for us. So we labored in the work, and half of the men held the spears from daybreak until the stars appeared. At the same time, I also said to the people, let each man and his servants stay at night in Jerusalem, so that they may be our guard at night and a working party by day. So this is where night shift came into play. So neither I, my brethren, my servant, nor the men of the guard who followed me took off our clothes, except that everyone took them off for washing. So this is where that term sleep with your socks, sleep with your shoes on. This is where that came into play. It says they didn't get comfortable unless they had to wash their clothes. In chapter 5. Now I'm going to start getting the major points. I'm not going to hold y'all too long. I'm going to go through chapter 5, chapter 6, some of chapter 7, and then I'm going to touch on certain points throughout. Chapter 8, 9. I may get chapter 8 and 9 on another lesson. No, I'm going to get it now. And then I'm going to get chapter 13, and I'm going to end it there. So chapter 5 reads, Nehemiah deals with oppression. And there was a great outcry of the people and their wives against their Jewish brethren. For there were those who said, we, our sons and our daughters, are many, therefore let us get grain, that we may eat and live. There were also some who said, we have mortgaged our lands and vineyards and houses, that we might buy grain because of the famine. So the people were given all that they had, simply so that they could put their energy into building. There were also those who said, we have borrowed money from the king's tax on our land and vineyards, yet now our flesh is as the flesh of our brethren, our children as their children, and indeed we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters have been brought into slavery. It is not in our power to redeem them, for other men have our lands and vineyards. And I became angry when I heard their outcry and these words. After serious thought, I rebuked the nobles and rulers and said to them, each of you is exacting usury from his brethren. So I called a great assembly against them. So he recognized that they were taking advantage of the Israelites, of the meek, of Israel. They were taking advantage of them and using them when they were in a vulnerable state, and basically taking their land and giving them, giving them different things. When the kings had when King Darius and King Cyrus, when Darius and Cyrus had decreed that the resources be brought out of the king's expenses, but yet you had Israelites that were using their own land in order to get expenses. So you can see how throughout time the wicked servants of these kingdoms would find a way to make it hard for the Israelites to build. And I said to them, according to our ability, we have redeemed our Jewish brethren. Shalakia. And I said to them, according to our ability, we have redeemed our brethren of Israel. It says our Jewish brethren, but we're not Jewish. We're from Judah, Benjamin, Levi, the kingdom of Yahweh, the kingdom of Judah. So sometimes I may say our brethren of Judah. Were sold to the nations. Now indeed, will you even sell your brethren? Or should they be sold to us? Then they were silenced and found nothing to say. Then I said, what are you doing? Shalakia. Then I said, what you are doing is not good. Should you not walk in the fear of our power? Because, Shalakia, should you not walk in the fear of Yahweh because of the reproach of the nations, our enemies? I also with my brethren and my servants am tending, Shalakia, am lending them money and grain. Please let us stop this usury. Restore now to them, even this day, their land, their vineyards, their olive groves, and their houses, also 100th of the money, and the grain, the new wine, the oil that you have charged them. So they weren't supposed to charge them for what they needed to build the temple. So they said, we will restore it and will require nothing from them. We will do as you say. When I called the priests and required an oath from them that they should do according to this promise, then I looked out of the fold of my garment. Shalakia, then I shook out of the fold of my garment and said, so may Yahweh shake out each man from his house and from his property, who does not perform this promise, even thus may he be shaken out and empty. And all the assembly said, Amen, and praised Yahweh. Then the people did according to this promise. The generosity of Nehemiah. Moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year until the 32nd year of Artaxerxes. So this gives a time period of when Nehemiah was appointed to be governor of the land. He may have came over